All right, today we have an amazing video for you guys. It's one of our top producers, Nick, actually dove into fantasy, and he's gonna show you guys how to not only create melodies with fantasy, but a lot of different cool sound design tricks where you can really take the one-shots and do some cool processing stuff to kind of take them to the next level. But real quick, I wanna go ahead and mention, a lot of you guys may know we're releasing one of the biggest one-shot synth packs we have ever done very soon called Legends, but one thing we haven't really announced and talked about just yet was actually the Legends sound design course. One of the best things about this one-shot collection is that not only do they sound great, but if you have a little bit of sound design skills, they go a long way. That means understanding how to process them correctly. That means understanding how in different scenarios for a certain style of melody, you may want to do a different chain of effects for that melody specifically, or if you're going for a different direction with chords, understanding how to do that. And the people who really understand sound design are going to be people who take Legends and really take it to its max potential. And with that being said, we've decided to create a Legends sound design course, but keep in mind we're only releasing 1,750 licenses of Legends next Friday on July 17th. So if you want to make sure you get in on that, get free enrollment to the course, not to mention 4 unreleased bonuses, a gift card, and if you're one of the first 150, get a USB. Just make sure that you're ready on that day, because last time when we did a big product like Dragons, it actually sold out in under 3 hours. Anyways, get ready for Legends, and I hope you learned a lot in this video. Make sure you take notes because he's going over a lot of great stuff.
Hey guys, this is Nick with Cymatics, and welcome to this video where I'm going to teach you guys how to make melodies out of synth one-shots that we recorded for the fantasy pack here, which is a free pack. And what we're going to be doing is putting together a simple melody out of some of the one-shots in this pack, and just talking a little bit about the history of the synths which we recorded for this. A lot of these synths are extremely rare vintage synths that we were fortunate enough to get our hands on and record pretty much everything they can produce in terms of sound and texture and tone. So we really did our best to kind of get everything these synths have to offer, make them usable in a production scenario. So I'm just going to show you guys the basic methodology here. So generally, there's kind of 2 ways of approaching this. You can either just drag these sounds out of the folder and into your DAW and then transpose them there. You can use them as sort of kind of arrangement effects, I guess, in that sense, because it's a bit harder to write a melody this way. Or you can use a MIDI track and load in whatever sampler or simpler, in the case of Ableton, but whatever sampler that your DAW has, you should just use that. And that should be enough to play these one-shots, like as if you actually have the synth there in your studio. The one-shots are a pretty versatile format because they let you do several things that are not possible to do on the real hardware synths. For example, on some of the synths, like the ARP 2600 or the Moog Model D, those synths are monophonic, which means you can't play multiple notes at once. But with the sampler or any DAW kind of native sampler, you could just play multiple notes and you'll have no problem playing chords. You can have as many voices as you want. Yeah, so that's kind of the main advantage. And the other thing is that it's the exact sound that we're recording out of the synths. So you're not emulating the sound. It's directly output out of the machine. And yeah, so that's pretty good in my opinion. It's a lot better than having to buy these things, or even if you do have the money, a lot of these rarely appear on the market. So anyways, without further ado, let's just get started here. I'm gonna scroll through some of these sounds. These are all just single note recordings tuned to the note C, so that you don't have to transpose anything if you're switching samples out. So let's use this Jupiter 8 key here. Just throw it into sampler. You'll notice that sometimes the keys, as you go up the octaves, they get shorter. The notes get shorter. That's kind of normal behavior, but if you want to fix that and make it constant throughout the keyboard, then just enable Ableton, just click the warp button and click Complex Pro or Complex. And that should keep the length of all the notes constant throughout the keyboard. But I'm going to keep it off for now because I like how natural it sounds when it's off, because all the notes detune in a very similar way to how they detune on the real thing. So I'm just going to make a MIDI track, have like a tempo of 150 or maybe 136. Okay. Have a metronome, and just start putting in the MIDI. That's it. So this is the Jupiter 8. It's an 8-voice polyphonic synthesizer by Roland, released in the early 80s. It has 2 oscillators per voice, and it has a lot of cool stuff on it, including an arpeggiator, which you can just hold a chord with your hand and it'll play through all the notes. Very sick synth. It was like their flagship synth, and it had quite a deep sound just by virtue of having 2 oscillators across 8 voices. And it was I don't know, I enjoyed the balance of like vintage and modern of that synth, because it looked nifty. It felt pretty kind of new to the touch when you played it. The key action was pretty synthetic, but at the same time it could produce very warm sounds both in the bass and in the lead sections, and produce very nice chords obviously. But also it had 2 filters, a 12 dB low pass and a 24 dB low pass, as well as a high pass filter, which gave you quite a bit of movement. You could try a lot of different tones with it. You can get kind of high pass sounds, low pass sounds, and use the envelopes to get different shapes for the notes themselves. So we're gonna add another chord here. You can make it more plucky by using the envelopes on your sampler. But I would rather just keep it as is. And I'm just going to loop this. And you can also transpose it down an octave. Increase the attack a bit to soften the attack. And use the filter on your sampler to kind of cut away some of that low end. And we're going to spruce up these sounds later, but I just want to show you just the basics and then accelerate here a little bit and just kind of demonstrate how quickly you can come up with a combination of sounds, which if you were to do in real life, you'd be, you know, 6 figures in by now. So let's find some other synthesizer here. Listen to that bass, it's crazy. So, okay, let's try this sound. So this is a memory Moog. It's basically 6 Moog Model Ds in one. It's 6 voice, 3 oscillator per voice polyphonic synth by Moog. And when it stayed in tune, it was extremely fun to play. It could generate a ridiculous diversity of sounds, and it had 100 patches on it, which was revolutionary for the time. Right now it's, you know, laughable, but back then it was really groundbreaking. So I'm gonna just play little block notes here and increase the release so that the entire note plays out. Whoops. I'm gonna duplicate this over here. Keep it simple. Use a filter here. High pass the high end, the low end away. The other nice thing about using one-shots is that you get velocity, which none of the synths that we were playing with basically had, apart from maybe the Korg, but you can make notes quieter, louder. Let's add another MIDI track, add another sound. Oberheim, we had two Oberheim synths that we played with, the OB8 and the OBX. Very similar synths to one another, but OB8 had 8-voice polyphony, had 2 oscillators per voice, had a lot of interesting routing modulation options. The OBX was a bit less featureful, but still sounded amazing, and they have a very brutal filter, classic sort of Oberheim filter, and I believe on the OB8 it had a 24 and 12 dB switch for the low-pass filter. And they're very famous for their bass and lead sounds. So they're very kind of crystalline leads and extremely powerful bass lines that you can generate with this thing. You get these like... this is a very kind of typical Oberheim bass timbre. So if we were to just play with this for a bit. And what's cool is that we have like very long note lengths, so that you can even go and enable the glide, have it be monophonic, make the glide like 100 something milliseconds, and you can sort of slide up and down notes. Just giving it some motion. Let's try another bass sound. Oops. Model D has a absolutely fantastic bass tone. Very fat bass tone, actually. Amazing. Very similar to the Memory Moog tone as well. Fundamentally the same. ARP 2600, very unique synth. It voiced R2-D2 in the old Star Wars films. Can do a bunch of different things, from like really kooky, crazy effects to amazing basses and different leads and stuff. And it had an onboard spring reverb, which gives you like really cool sounds like that, which is just a spring on the synth itself. You can get really dynamic sounds out of it. A lot of different colors. Juno 106, classic. 1 oscillator per voice, but or Juno 60, 1 oscillator per voice, but it was a DCO, digitally controlled oscillator, instead of a voltage controlled oscillator, giving it a very stable pitch. But to make up for that, they added a chorus effect, which gave you kind of really interesting lush sounds, which actually became quite popular, appeared in a lot of pop records in the 80s. And I particularly like the bass on it. Let's add another sound. Let's try out the Prophet 5. One of my favorite synths. 5-voice synthesizer, 2 oscillators per voice by Dave Smith. Released in 1978. Extremely they really got it right with that synth in terms of how it looks, how much it weighs, how it feels to play, how it sounds, obviously, with the Curtis filter being like the very sweet sounding filter that you could almost play like it was his own oscillator. Cross modulation, that was just kind of the first synth to do a lot of different things. It was the first polyphonic programmable synth. And it had a wide range of sounds, and we recorded a bunch of stuff. Like we recorded a lot of the hard sync modulation stuff with the oscillators, and to get like really Blade Runner-esque bass lines. So here what I'm going to do is I'm gonna use a different sound here from the Prophet 5, like ooh, that's nice. It's very pretty. So we're gonna increase the release on that. Gives it a very triumphant feel, rather. So now what I'm going to do is go to the keys here. We're going to add our own chorus here. Start applying some effects. Really give it some motion there. And we're also going to add a bit of delay to just give it some sustain. Filter that a bit, and I'm going to unlink them. And modulate the rate a bit. Just to give it some motion. And we have reverbs and delays on our sends here too, so we're going to route a little bit to the reverb. Yeah, high quality on. You have a low size. It gives it a kind of a bathroom feel. increase the decay time of it. Finally, I'm going to use an equalizer to cut away some of the low end. And then move on to my next sound here. A cool thing you can try to really max out the vintage feel is to use the LFO on your simpler without the retriggering on to modulate the pitch just very subtly. And now we can start shoving the rest of our sounds into reverbs and delays to kind of really give them a huge vibe. Just want to make sure there's not a lot of build up in the low end here. Another funky thing you can try is having a chorus on the return track of the reverb. That'll give it a really kind of watery vibe. Here you can try an auto pan to just kind of move the sound around. And then route that into a delay or a reverb as well. Let's try some of this. Or find some other basses. Oops, wrong. I'm going to take a compressor here, a glue compressor, and just smash the bass here a bit. To just even out the level. And press it up against the rest of the mix. Another cool thing you can do in Ableton is use the auto filter and modulate the envelope up. Just to give it a bit of an opening feeling, you know? And I'm just going to give it a bit of delay. Maybe some quick ping pong delay. We can beef that main sound here. Kind of copy the bottom notes of this idea. Actually, we will just write them again. And use let's try a pluck here. The nice thing is you could just swap the sounds out. Just try different synths. Also take lead sounds and just like shorten them with an envelope to make them more like plucks. sick sounds in here. I want to try the Model D. Just having fun trying the different tones I can get. Sounds so good. So I'm just gonna have the delay do a I'm gonna do this, and then route or pan the delay to the other side. Okay, maybe unlink this and then make it a very short delay. That way it sounds like, yeah. Pretty sick. And finally, you can add a bit of saturation. Just give it some upper harmonics into a limiter. Just reduce the output. This might sound pretty sick with a chorus too, actually. So we're gonna put a chorus in. And finally, just actually run a compressor into the glue, or compressor into the saturator, to just give us a bit of glue, as it's known. And cut away a little bit of the high end from the bass. that's how you put together a melody loop out of the one-shots in the fantasy pack. And a lot of the effects and stuff that I was doing here, we were doing a lot of similar effects with a bunch of different plugins and stuff and some outboard gear, and to process some of the one-shots as well. And then what we're going to do for the pack is release a bunch of the racks that we were using as well. So that's going to be a big source of inspiration for you guys to like use a bunch of different racks on all the different like effects racks on all different one-shots to get different vibes and sounds. Because obviously, as you can see, we can get a much bigger, larger version of the loop with the effects and the reverbs and delays than rather, just have the audio going. And the other big advantage of all this stuff is that we are taking up no CPU power at all, basically. Just the effects are taking it up because we're just playing audio through a sampler. Cool, so I hope you guys enjoy these samples and come up with some interesting stuff, and thanks a lot for watching. Bye-bye.